What the journey has taught me was that you can do anything as long as you put in the time and the effort. So that's one of the biggest things I learned in my practicing Diabolo for like 8 years or so. There hasn't really been a trick that I just physically couldn't do yet. It might have taken a long time, like my 4 Diablos, it took me 3 years. 3 years is a long time. And throughout that entire process, there were times where I felt like I wasn't going anywhere, or I felt like I was actually going downhill. But I just kept going and practicing every day, and then it happened. So that's why I keep telling my students to just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and then sooner or later you're gonna get there. I'm here to help guide them to make sure they're on the right path. But as long as you practice, you put in the time, you put in the effort, put in the hard work, you could learn anything you want. That's one of the biggest things. Never give up. You're gonna come across a lot of slumps, a lot of plateaus when you're practicing for something, especially like Diablo. Some tricks are just harder to learn than others, and everybody learns at their own pace. What I used to do back then was to go on YouTube. YouTube was the answer. I see a trick I want to learn, I click on the video. But not only that, I could also watch performances of professionals and other artists out there. I look at their performance, and there's a section that I really like, and I try to slow it down, dissect it, try to practice on my own. But one thing I would really encourage to others is to use your own creativity and imagination to come up with the new tricks. You don't have to learn new tricks, you could actually think of new tricks. That's what I like about Diablo. There's really no limit to what you can do. If you can think of something, then you go try and do it. I take a few aspects from this pro and what I like from this pro, and I try to put them together to try to add it to my own craft. So maybe with this pro, I like his tricks, and then this other pro, I like the way they choreograph it. A lot of people, they continue to practice for a long period of time, and they just don't seem to be getting anywhere. Sometimes, honestly, you just need a break. If you over practice a lot, it might not be the best for you. So you take a little break. Or if you honestly feel like the more you're doing something wrong, something's just not right, not adding up, reach out to your resources out there, to pros. Look for YouTube videos and just see if you're doing anything wrong technically. It won't always be an uphill climb when learning a new trick. Sometimes you can learn it really quickly. Sometimes you're gonna feel like you're not getting anywhere for a long time. You're gonna need some breaks in between. And honestly, sometimes you might feel like you're going downhill, getting worse than before. That's all perfectly normal. But you just have to keep practicing. If you give up, you're never gonna learn it. But if you fall backwards, you could always just continue practicing, and then you're gonna get there one day. Another problem would be sometimes you feel like you learned your trick already, and then the next week or the next day, you just completely forget how to do it. That's, again, also normal. It's happened to me many, many times. But you, again, just keep practicing, don't get frustrated, and then after a certain period of time, you're gonna get there. The way I practice for my performances is to practice as if it were a performance. There's no audience there, but I pretend there's an audience. There's no audience when you're practicing, but there's a huge audience when you're performing. And your job when you're performing as a performer is to entertain the audience. And when it's your time to step on stage, just go up and you do your craft. And don't think about the present and not what's gonna happen in the future. That's one of the biggest things I've learned as a performer through my experiences. Back then, I would think about the trick I was gonna do like 30 seconds later into the performance, like, oh, that's a big trick. What if I mess that up? I don't want to mess that up. And then if I mess up, I don't just stop the music, restart the performance. You actually, what I would suggest you do is to go through the entire routine once, and then if you mess up, you continue as if it were in actual performances. And then after you run through that rehearsal once, take that specific part of the routine that you mess up, and maybe repeat it and do it over like 5-6 times, and then run through it again. But now I just think, all right, this is a trick I'm doing now, I'm gonna focus, I'm gonna get it, and I'll move on. And then another important one would be to act as if there were an audience watching you. So you gotta do this facial expressions, your showmanship, smile, no matter what happens. You really just have to keep a smile on your face and move along with the performance, like any other performance, yeah. Well, there was this one performance where I had the partner on stage, and I was behind the audience. with the audience between us, me and my partner. And I was supposed to toss a yo-yo over the audience onto stage where my partner was supposed to catch it. But I was distracted, I was the guy tossing. I miscalculated and the toss didn't go as far as I intended to and landed in the middle of the audience, but luckily I didn't hit anyone. But like any other mistake, I just picked it up, went on stage and continued as if nothing happened. And then after that, I apologized and everything. But that was one of the biggest mess ups I've had in my performance. My favorite kinds of performances, again, it would be the ones where the audience, I have a lot of feedback from the audience. As in, I do some tricks and they clap really loudly, they cheer really loudly. It gives me motivation on stage, on the spot. And as a performer, I think that's what all performers really like, feedback from the audience. A big way to get feedback from the audience would be breaks in your performances. Ending poses, after you do a big trick, you stop, you stand in a pose, you smile at the audience for a good 2 seconds, and then usually they would clap and give you some feedback like that. After my performances, usually I would take a little break from practicing actually and just absorb, because you learn the most from your performances. It's not really when you're practicing that I've learned the most from. I've learned most from all my performances, all the mistakes I've made from my performances. So usually after a performance, I take a few days off practice and I just absorb all that and reflect on it. I always have a video recording of my performances and I just watch it over and over and over again to single out the mistakes and the errors and the parts where I think I could have done better, and I try to keep that in mind when I'm working on my next performances. There's always something you can learn from every single performance. Even if it's a flawless performance, there's always something that you could do better, and it's about figuring what that is and working on it.